let's bring in our in-studio guest who is standing by with us. Trial and civil attorney Ted Spaulding is here. Ted, it's been days and days and days of testimony in this case. 22 days we're on right now. And I want you to imagine, if you don't know anything about this case, and you know that the Commonwealth, the state in this case, they haven't brought in their lead investigator, Michael Proctor, who we're hearing the name of. These jurors have heard his name throughout, but he hasn't come to the stand yet. In terms of organizing your witnesses, does that raise an eyebrow for you when you don't have your lead investigator starting things off?
I think so. What you're always worried about trying a case is, am I having too much time in between explaining different pieces to the jury? Because on breaks like we're having now, at the end of the day, they go home. If they're sequestered, they're going back to the hotel. Are they thinking of things? Well, why haven't I heard from him yet? You know, we're hearing about this conspiracy. He's at the center of it in his investigation. Why haven't we seen him yet? We've seen all of these other officers with little bits and pieces. Why don't we have that person who's the lead one here? Yeah. So, look, it's always easy for us sitting back, not being the trial attorney, saying, hey, I would have done it this way or that way. You never know for sure whether that could sway. Was that a mistake? Was that smart to wait? Maybe they're waiting to the very end to have him. These are things that trial attorneys sweat over all the time in preparing and then as you're going through the trial.
Another thing that we have not heard from, another person rather that we haven't heard from, is the medical examiner who's going to tell us more about the injuries on John O'Keefe's body. I know you've done a lot of cases that have needed accident reconstruction, ones where a pedestrian was hit. Your thoughts on these injuries that we have in this case, and whether or not what we're hearing about the damage to the vehicle, this Lexus SUV with the dent, with the cracked taillight, what does that say to you in your experience?
Yeah. This is the part for me, and maybe it's because of my background, that I struggle with. It looks like a very low impact. Yes, we do have a pedestrian instead of another vehicle that you're hitting, but where the light is, he's 6'3". I'm struggling to figure out where the damage is to the vehicle and how that resulted in black eyes, those sorts of things. Now, something we were talking about off camera that you see in injury cases is it doesn't always line up either. You can have very bizarre injuries that you wouldn't have thought is related to whatever your incident is. So you got to be careful with that, but I think the medical examiner is going to be really important, and I'm really interested to see, is the defense going to call an accident reconstructionist? Because they're
trying to get one in.
They're great experts. They're great experts. They're fascinating, and they can break it down to, this is what it would look like. The prosecution is saying 60 miles an hour. Here's what the vehicle should have looked like. Then you can get a human factors expert that can testify as to damage to the body that you would normally get in that type of wreck. So it would be really interesting to see how the defense tackles that.
We will see. And actually, we're going to squeeze in a break, but we are getting word just now that Trooper Michael Proctor is the next witness for the Commonwealth. They are going to call him to the stand. Don't go anywhere. This is CourtTV Live. All right, we're going to hit the pause button on this testimony. We do have to squeeze in a break, but quickly, I want to bring in trial and civil attorney Ted Spaulding, who's here in studio with us. Ted, we're hearing the prosecution walk the witness through what happened that day in his investigation. But if this jury remembers what was said by the defense during opening statements, they may have in their mind some distasteful, some borderline unethical things that Trooper Proctor said during his investigation, where he is accused of saying to buddies that when he got the phone of Karen Reed, he was, quote, looking for nudes in her phone, and that he wanted her to end her life. Should the prosecution be attacking that or bringing that out early in his direct, or do you think it's going to be right at the end before it goes in the cross?
It appears it will be at the end. I mean, let's hope they do it, right? Number one, I think they absolutely need to. The strategy of, do you hit it at the very beginning? Do you wait until the witness gets comfortable on the stand? You would think a detective with his experience, he's been on the stand multiple times as a seasoned vet at testifying. I don't know if maybe they decided not to hit him right at the beginning with it because in discussing things with him, going over his testimony, he was nervous. They realized we need to get him settled in first. You don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I think it would have been really interesting to just come out right at the beginning and say, you know, officer, I don't know, you haven't heard, but here's the deal. We've got an issue here. Tell us what happened. And get that out of the way. Then end with all of your building blocks of the evidence, everything that he did with his investigation. Because now you've got, you would think, the jurors are going throughout all of this testimony going, when are we going to get to it? When are we going to get to it? I want to hear about this stuff. What's this about the phone? You know, that kind of thing. You would assume, at least, right? Maybe their strategy, we talked earlier, not putting them up at the beginning, is maybe the prosecution was hoping they'd forget about those things. I don't know. They know defense is just waiting. And it's going to cross.
They've come to expect
so
it.
Shouldn't really think that. So this is all really interesting, kind of gamesmanship and the trial strategy within the strategy.
Sure. That is on play for sure in this case. We do have to get to that break, but we're going to get you back inside of that courtroom. Pick it up right where we left off with Trooper Proctor on the stand. All right, they're taking that sidebar. Let's bring back in trial and civil attorney Ted Spaulding, who's here with us. Ted, you mentioned they're not laying the foundation properly. Your thoughts on the trial process there? Yeah,
that was interesting. It started to look to me like this is something that came out of left field. They weren't prepared for it. He started to testify, as the viewer saw. He was going to say it is common, and I've seen this as well, so I know he's right in this, that pedestrian versus vehicle wrecks, oftentimes a piece of footwear will fly off. That is very, very common at those scenes. So they're trying to lay that foundation. The problem is, it sounds like they didn't know what he was going to say, so they haven't gone over this with him first, it doesn't sound like, because he said only 3 or 4 during his detective work. Then they started to go into, rightly, well, he obviously probably was an officer doing traffic and wrecks and those sorts of things, but then he only said another 3 or 4. So now you've got 6 to 8. Yeah, that he's done. You know, what you want is, yes, I was on the traffic unit. Heck, maybe he was on a skirt team, which is like the real big traffic unit investigators. I've seen hundreds of pedestrian wrecks, deaths. You see a sneaker go off, that sort of thing. I'm worried they're not going to be able to do it.
John O'Keefe's sneaker was found far away from his body. It's something the jury has seen those photos of, that shoe in the snow. This officer is saying that he noticed the abrasions on John O'Keefe's arm almost immediately. This is something that has befuddled people who are following this case closely, really. These scratches and the things that he was wearing. I do have to take a break now, though, Ted. We have to get to that commercial break so that we can get back into the courtroom. But just take a look there at this evidence that we're hearing Trooper Proctor talk about. I mean, this is what is going to be the focus of these jurors when they're listening to that testimony. We will have more in the Karen Reed trial coming up.